Dane Brugler's beast is out. Where does he differ from consensus? Top 100 from Dane Brugler, the fantastic analyst for The Athletic. Where does he see these prospects, and what can we learn from the beast on today's episode of Peacock and Williamson?
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making this your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Really appreciate you guys hanging out with us as we break down everything going on right now at the NFL Draft and heading towards the 2025 NFL season. If you are new to the program, welcome. You can subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you listen to your podcast and get those mailbag questions in for us this week at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL or in the YouTube comments. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel. And right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just go to FanDuel.com to get started. All right. Really, one of the things we want to do today is just kind of shout out Dane Brugler and the fantastic work he does every single year. The beast. It is the draft guide. It's the one document, if you could only have one every year as it pertains to the NFL. Actually, take that back. It's the second after the draft ditties that appear in the draft courtesy of Mr. Matt Williamson. But just the depth of information on, I don't know how many prospects, 400 prospects are in, and he prides himself. Like Dane Brugler will be so mad if in the late 7th round, there's a prospect that's drafted that's not in the beast. He will be so upset by that. And for him, I hope that doesn't happen. But so much information, in-depth information on every prospect, and he does such a good job. And I want to dive into his top 100 here today. And I think there's some very interesting rankings, and I think it kind of underscores this class and how much of a trust the tape draft class this is here in 2025, man.
Yeah, and we have no affiliation with Dane directly. I've talked to him many times. He's a good dude, or The Athletic, but it's such a massive publication, and there's other good ones out there too. Matt Waldman's RSP. I mean, there's a lot of good ones too.
Yes.
Fran Duffy has his available this year. I mean, you can go on and on and on, but it's a monumental day in the draft process, to be honest with you. I mean, it came out on 4/9. My anniversary, that's how I remember that. 49ers, that's how I remember my anniversary. You'd probably get a kick out of that.
Here you go.
But it was but there's so much story involved too. The history of this draft prospect, going back to when they, where they came from, what their story is. And trust me, once the Steelers draft a guy in the 7th round I've hardly heard about, that's my first spot to go. You can find more out, and so this is good stuff. Dane really, really does a good job. I urge you to check it out. And his top 100 will just bring up a lot of conversation,
Absolutely. Worth the price of admission. I would pay for The Athletic every single year just for the beast.
That one day.
Obviously, a lot of other great reporting at The Athletic as well. But so enough about that. This is not an ad for The Athletic, but I do want to praise Brugler's work because he does fine work here. Let's get into his top 100. And again,
sure.
Part of why it's such a good document is how much information, how much background there is. And Dane Brugler talks to a lot of people. He talks to scouts. He does his own evaluations, and he talks to coaches. So he gets a lot of information. And so I think you should take some notice when he ranks players a certain way, especially if it's off of consensus. Let's just roll through really quick. And you're gonna have to go to The Athletic to find the whole thing and check out the beast to season.
Yeah, we're not gonna talk every 1 to 100 here, but
And I think the top's probably not too shocking. He's got Travis Hunter as the number 1 prospect in this class, with Abdul Carter 2, Ashton Genty is number 3. That's followed by Mason Graham 4, Jalen Walker 5, Will Campbell 6, Armand Membo 7. So back-to-back tackles there in the top 10. Then Tyler Warren and Shamar Stewart and Mike Green. That rounds out the top 10 prospects for Dane Brugler in the 2025 NFL Draft. I don't think the top is super shocking. I think Mason Graham, in a lot of circles, I think Mason Graham is just thought of as a top dude. Forget, the spring workout process, which is something I want to talk about a lot here, because I can't remember a time there's so many prospects where you have an incomplete picture and guys that aren't testing that are still going to potentially go really high, or does it end up hurting someone like Mason Graham, who the tape is awesome, or someone like Jalen Walker, who's a tweener and still didn't run a 40. And I think we'll get to someone like Will Johnson a little bit later, who actually had his private pro day finally today and did not run a 40. So just incomplete all around. So if you're Shamar Stewart, you're like, look, you guys are afraid to run because you're slow. Guess what? I'm big and I'm fast. I know I didn't have any sacks, and maybe you don't like some aspects of the tape, but at least you could check some more boxes for me here. So it's a fascinating class to me. And I think the big one that has really the big variance here is Jalen Walker, because I don't think he's a fit for every team. Some people love him, and when you love him, you think he's a top 5 guy like Brugler does. But I think if you run a certain scheme on defense, I think it'd be hard for you to draft him in the first round at all.
So my take on the top 10 is I believe there are 3 blue chip players in Hunter, Carter, and Genty. So we agree on that those are the top 3 guys. Cam Ward is also, his own beast, because he's not weighing quarterbacks heavier, but he should be right up there in terms of premier prospects. But I look at Graham and Walker at 4 and 5 and just say, man, that is a weak area of this draft. I mean, if that's the 4th and 5th best prospect, I don't know, either one goes top 10 last year, or most years, maybe they're fringe top 10 type of guys. And I also think Stewart at 9 is noteworthy, as you mentioned. I mean, he doesn't make that many plays against the run either. He does have a lot of pressures, not sacks, but I don't think he quite knows how to finish. That's for sure.
I listened to a podcast recently with Brugler explaining Shamar Stewart, and this question was asked of him just because he's so far off from a guy, Fran Duffy, who was also on the same podcast, and they're like the highest and lowest on Shamar Stewart. And so Brugler has him in the top 10, and his argument was simple. It was just that he's a freak, and the NFL loves that. And when you've got prototype height, weight, and ridiculous athleticism, speed, and explosion, it's not far off from what Jadeveon Clowney was as a prospect. And some of his weaknesses are somewhat similar as well. Not quite as powerful, right? But you can talk yourself into it. And, maybe if he plays lighter and he was playing a little bit out of position at A&M, and even Scorton, who had better sack numbers, had talked about how, he probably could be used better. And he dropped a bunch of weight, and they both dropped a bunch of weight from what they were asked to play at Texas A&M. So at 270 pounds, he's going to be different than he was at 285 or whatever he was playing at in college. I think it was 267 or something like that. So will his quicks at the top of his rush be a little bit better, a little bit different? But it was just the traits was the argument. Fran Duffy had him ranked 61. And that argument I totally agree with too. It's like, man, if you can't get sacks in college, how do you expect to get sacks in the NFL? And when you watch his tape, there's good reasons why he doesn't get sacks, because he's not good at the top of his rush. He's legitimately bad there. And so you can't just run in a straight line and be a good NFL player, really, at any position. And
Can that be taught? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. He's always constantly, we talked about this yesterday when we were doing the mock draft. You watch because he's got a really good prospect on his own defensive line, Shamar Stewart does, right? Mm-hmm. And when you watch
a couple.
Yeah, and when you watch the other defensive end, Nick Scorton, rush the quarterback at the end of the play, pause it. Nick Scorton's facing the quarterback and has turned the corner and made some kind of move, whether it's a counter or an initial rush move. And the quarterback is kind of next to Shamar Stewart. Like he's always like over here. Like the running back, the quarterback is never in front of him to make the play. It's always kind of like over here, and it's awkward. He misses the play, misses the tackle. And so there is some disruption, and he has an immediate advantage on every single offensive tackle he faces because he's so explosive and his get off, and he gets
so long. Right.
Yeah. The fact that he still doesn't win those reps when he's got such a huge advantage first, to me, is more of a red flag, but that's why he's going to get drafted, because of that explosive ability. So I wouldn't touch him in the top 10, but you should not be. In fact, I had him going 9 to the Saints in my mock draft. So you shouldn't be shocked if he does end up going in the top 10. I just personally wouldn't touch him there. And I think the big thing that people bring up is outliers, and you don't want to draft the outlier in that if your argument is, oh, look, Danielle Hunter was the same exact prospect coming out. It's like, okay, cool. Then give me him in the 3rd round.
Absolutely. That's what I said. Yeah.
Fine. Yeah, I'll take Shamar Stewart in the 3rd round. You're talking about a top 10 pick. I'm not going to bet on that rare outcome in the top 10. So that's where
and even Oweh was a late first. You know, he didn't have any sacks his last year. I mean,
he had better sack production previously than
he had at least had some. Yeah,
Shamar Stewart, 1.5 sacks every year, 3 years in a row. That's it.
that's
And
crazy.
so people are trying to talk about Mykel Williams and his lack of production. Mykel Williams, as a true freshman at Georgia, had as many sacks that 1 year and every year of his 3-year college career that Shamar Stewart did in his entire career combined. And that was a player that already people don't like his production. So that's how little production Shamar Stewart has. So you're betting on an outlier there for sure.
No question. I mean, you better have a good D-line coach is all I can say.
And I think last note on Stewart, he's a fascinating prospect for me, but I think biomechanically is why. It's not like, oh, he can use his hands better in technique, and I'm sure he could get better and have more than 1.5 sacks. But he's tight and he can't turn.
Yeah.
His feet slip out from under him sometimes when he's trying to turn. And maybe he can kind of work on not going as fast and actually slow down and get better by slowing down in some ways, like a pitcher that only throws a fastball. Maybe, I don't know, but I wouldn't bet on it that early. Third round, like Daniel Hunter. Yeah, okay. Now we're talking. If you want to compare him to Daniel Hunter, give me in third round. Let's go.
I think his athleticism, for all those reasons, is overrated too. His straight line athleticism is great, but his bend the edge athleticism isn't.
And again, another theme in this draft. What did he not do? He didn't do any testing that showed lateral
weaknesses. Right.
Yeah,
exactly. Right.
Yeah, he's got this.
You're bad at it, just don't test. That's the new theme in the league.
Exactly. Yeah. So
just don't do it.
You have to assume it's bad, and that's why Ashton Genty, is he really that type of prospect? He didn't run, right? And so a lot of these teams, top 5, top 10, you have to make some decisions on guys they don't have a complete picture for as far as testing goes. Let's talk about some more of those. And some
one little note on Genty, though. I just think he's so strong and so firmly established as RB1. I'm not sure he had anything to gain by running. I mean, if he runs a 4.3, would he go in the top 3? No,
Right. He's not going to go higher than 6, probably.
Right.
But does he?
It could hurt him a little, but it can't help him enough.
Does he lose? Like if you were just going to stamp what people thought you were anyway, then that's fine, right? But the fact that you didn't run, and also it'd be like, I would just question, like, okay, like you didn't run. What are you afraid of? Like,
no, I hear.
I think the other side of it too. 4.3 might not have helped him. Does 4.5 even hurt him though?
Probably not.
You open the door, I think, for someone to go ahead of you, right? So, let's talk about that. Who could go ahead of Ashton Genty? Because those guys didn't run 40s either. Will Johnson, the guy I put in my mock draft. All right, we got a lot to get to, and we'll talk about some more of high variance prospects in Dane Brugler's top 100 next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Monarch Money. And when it comes to money and checking your bank account, you ever look at it and you're like, where'd all that money go? And it's not a great feeling in between, dining out, online shopping, entertainment. There's so many easy ways to lose track of your funds. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. And I love this aspect of it. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever with Monarch Money. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, moving on. Let's get past the top 10 in this top 100 prospects, according to Dane Brugler. I do think it's interesting that he's got tight ends very high. Warren is number 8 on his board. Just outside the top 10, Colston Loveland out of Michigan is 11. And then he's got Mason Taylor at 33. So just outside the first round area of players, ahead of some guys that are consistently going in round 1 of the draft. So high on the tight ends and running backs this year. Elijah Arroyo, tight end 4, is pick 41 on his big board.
Yeah, that stood out to me, to have 4 tight ends in your top 41, 2 in your top 11. And it shouldn't surprise anyone that's followed this draft too, that just looking at his board, 6 edges in the top 22. I mean, like, wow, that's a pretty good group.
So we teased a little bit about the no 40 time for Will Johnson. So he had the injury, obviously, this year. Then felt a little tight in his hamstring at the Michigan Pro Day, apparently. So he didn't work out there. And then had this extra Pro Day. And I imagine there's some scouts and teams that are pretty annoyed if they went all the way to watch his personal Pro Day now. And then he still didn't run a 40-yard dash, man.
Right,
So Will Johnson, he's number 18 on Brugler's big board. And now that there's no 40-yard dash time, I think that's probably right, And it's also one of the most telling non-workouts in this draft. I think there's some big ones. For me, Jalen Walker is another one, because if you're going to draft Jalen Walker in the top 5, who lacks some pass rush, development, and is also an outlier as far as length goes for a pass rusher. Like, what do you really have to go on to project him as a top 5 player? And I think you start to feel that way, especially with the cornerback position. Like, can you think of not only a top 10, but a first round corner period that didn't run a 40 time? And
I could argue that's the most important position to get a 40 time.
Yeah. And look, you don't need 4.2, because it's just don't run 4.6 kind of, right? And so you're telling me that you probably you're not even convinced that you're going to run much better than a 4.55 if you don't run the 40 time.
That's the way I take it too.
And by the way, here's Brugler's report from this morning, actually, about that workout. Michigan cornerback Will Johnson worked out for NFL teams this morning. A few notes from scouts in attendance: no 40-yard dash, 37-inch vertical, 4.33 short shuttle, above average during positional drills, quote, very smooth. We already knew that. So
that's not shocking though, right?
Pointless. If I'm a scout in attendance, I'm like, I did not learn anything new about Will Johnson. So if you loved him on tape, I guess you still love him. But enough questions that my mock draft of having him going ahead of Genty at pick number 6 to the Raiders. I just don't know if you can do that if you're the Raiders. But at the same time, Genty didn't run a 40 either. Neither did Jalen Walker. Mason Graham didn't. So who you drafting that did run a 40 at pick 6 if you're the Raiders anyway?
Good point. And just to stick with Johnson real quick, I mean, his 2024 tape raises a lot more questions than answers. In and out of the lineup, suspect willingness to tackle and throw his body around. The speed doesn't look tremendous on tape. If it's not for 2023, we're not having this conversation. We're talking about him as like the 50th corner, or the 50th player.
Exactly.
And I like him. But there's questions.
It's not like it wasn't a question either. Like if you pulled NFL GMs and scouts and said, okay, what's the one testing number that you really want to see in this draft from, first round consensus prospects? It'd probably be Will Johnson's 40 time, right?
Yeah, right. Right top of the list.
Yep.
And he says no, which is, again, a huge red flag.
What else stands out to you in this top 100 from Dane Brugler?
There's a name I wanted to bring up yesterday that I think is a real sneaky candidate to get in the first round, especially because of the position he plays. And that's Ursery from Minnesota, big offensive tackle. Dane has him at 37. And I bet if we went back through beast history and an offensive tackle is in Dane's top 40, I bet they almost always end up in the first round, just because the position scarcity.
That's a good point. I want to talk quarterbacks because in a draft where outside of the top couple of guys, there's not a lot of consensus and not a lot of blue chip prospects, and we are expecting a quarterback to go number 1 overall, I think it's kind of interesting that Cam Ward still is only at number 13. Like, shouldn't he be like 2 or like 3 or 4 on this list, right? But he's still all the way down at 13 behind some of the guys that we have questions about. So he's the 13th prospect, but Dane does have 4 quarterbacks in the top 50. He's got Shedeur Sanders at
all the way down 34, though, which I think is about right. I think he is a
second. Then you give a bump, so he's a first round guy all day at a quarterback, right? And then here's the interesting ones: is Jackson Dart and Tyler Shuck back to back at 49 and 50, and so that's kind of an area where you can expect those players to jump up. So that's, you're talking early second, and who knows, maybe one of those guys goes in the first. Not Jalen Milroe though.
No, and I've heard plenty of podcasts. I know you have too, with Dane on there, and he's all over the place right now, of course. He doesn't say a lot great about Dart, and he seems to, and I'm the same way. Like, I just don't see
it's just been accepted that that's where he's going to go. And it's like, all right, I'm not sure about that. That's kind of where I'm at. It's the internet meme from Tim Robinson. Are you sure?
Are you sure? Yeah.
About Jackson Dart. Milroe is 73, by the way, so he's on the top 100, just not in the top 50.
Yes, and I think he'll go noticeably higher than that. I've also heard Dane mention that he does not think he's going to last till 73. I mean, I think that he thinks he'll go early to mid second round as well. I see the allure in Milroe more than I do with Dart, but I understand that I'm in the minority there. Oh, another thing I wanted to bring up too, just with the earlier picks, was the offensive tackle from Ohio State, Josh Simmons. He has a 20. So I that doesn't shock me in a nutshell, but the fact that he has now I can't find them, but the two corners, Ravel and Benjamin, in the 60s and 70s. Ravel is 62, Benjamin Morrison is 69. And the only reason I bring them all together is because they all have major, injury durability issues. You could say Ravel and Morrison are first round players, and as is the tackle, but Connerly's at 23, Morrison's at 69, Ravel's at 62. Is he feeling a lot better about the injury for the offensive lineman, Simmons, more so than the corners? I don't know. I mean, what's he hearing?
Yeah, that's tough. Maybe Simmons has done enough to make teams believe that he could be ready sooner, and it's not going to be a long-term problem with his patellar tendon injury. But usually that's a really nasty injury. But he's further along in his recovery, I think, than the other two prospects. Ravel is an interesting one because, I mean, it's an ACL, right? And it's Savone, is how you pronounce it. That's
You're right. You're right. It is.
You get a lot of pronunciations, and so
that's another thing with the beast. You get the pronunciations. Right?
He's a freak, and hasn't had a chance to work out. But that's the type of injury that guys do come back from. So maybe a little bit more question just because where he's at in his recovery. But I think all three of these guys are so different with what their injuries are too. So I don't think you can even lump them into the same injury red flag concern category. Benjamin Morrison, I think, is going to be the guy who goes even later than what they have him at 69 here. He'd be off my board completely. It's multiple injuries, both hips. Right. It's really bad. And so, like, Benjamin Morrison's one of those guys you're like, oh my gosh, he didn't even get drafted. Like, I don't know if it'll be that bad, but he's a player where you can't look at the tape and be like, oh, that's the player we're going to have in the NFL. That's a really tough one for me. It might be worse than the others combined.
Yeah, I get that too. I mean, you hate hearing hip in high school, other hip in college for Morrison, for a guy that's all about hip turn and swivel and
it is a tough one. But yeah, again, medical and character, you have no idea, and I think some of those are baked in with what Brugler is hearing along with his evaluations, and so we'll see with some of those, but you just never know. And it really only takes one team to not have a big worry about some off field stuff.
Sure,
or some,
one team doctor says don't sweat it.
Next, we'll get into the rest of the top 100 for Dane Brugler. What stands out to us? Some players to maybe be pleasantly or disappointed by where they go, depending on what your angle is on draft day. Next. The final segment of this episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And the NBA playoffs are now here. We're doing play-in games. We're getting ready for the playoffs, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. Love how FanDuel makes betting easy, whether you're betting on your favorite team or diving into player props, from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. And of course, you can still bet on the NFL draft, a bunch of NFL draft props as well at FanDuel. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live props and bets into same game parlays for a chance to win even bigger. So don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Download the app or go to FanDuel.com. All right, so looking at Brugler's Beast and the top 100, just some names here that I want to throw out there that I think Brugler is higher on than some others. We talked about the tight ends. He's got a fifth tight end in his top 75, Terrence Ferguson, athletic tight end out of Oregon. But it's the next group just outside of the top 75 here that I find really interesting. Jordan James. I mean, I can't
believe you brought him up. He's who I have highlight to bring up. That's a funny one.
It's one of his favorite guys, and I've heard him talk about him, and he said he liked him better than Bucky Irving previously from Oregon. And, he doesn't really stand out height, weight, speed, or anything like that, but he's just a solid running back and one of those guys that, surprises folks maybe. So he's 77 overall, running back 7 in his pre-draft rankings. And this whole grouping
I think
here,
he should be like a perfect example of maybe running back measurables don't matter as much as you think,
right.
He's hard to tackle. He's smart, right.
Nobody's worried about Ashton Genty's 40 time or speed or anything like that too, even though we talked about it. You would like to check off the box, and that's kind of like he's compared actually in the beast to LaDainian Tomlinson. And that's one thing. It's like, okay, does he have that much speed? I don't know.
Pretty good.
He's a good prospect. And look, and this is why you don't draft running backs in the first round, right? Because you can draft Jordan James. He's not going to go 77. You can draft him probably 177.
I bet you give him the 50. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and he might start games in the NFL, right? He might be a league winner for your fantasy football team. It's just the way it is for running backs.
So a couple of notes along those lines too is I found it interesting. We all agree it's a really good running back draft, but he only has 9 in his top 100, and several of them are pretty late. Harvey's 93 and ATN's 97. So I kind of found that interesting. I found it interesting that only 12 wide receivers are in his top 100, and 3 of them are 88 or lower. I mean, that's really rare compared to other years. Yeah. And as we mentioned, 7 tight ends, 17 edges in your top 100. That's pretty strong. I mean, there's only 2 more running backs than tight ends.
I mean, it's crazy amount of defensive linemen, tackles, and you've got little guys, you got big guys. A perfect example here is Josiah Stewart. He was super productive in college. Yep. Aston Gillott, they're right here after Jordan James, 78 and 80 respectively. So Gillott out of Louisville just gets after the quarterback, doesn't blow you away with his athleticism. And then Josiah Stewart, look, he's not going to fit every team, but just as a pass rush specialist, gets after the quarterback, 6'1", 249. If you told me that Josiah Stewart ends up with more sacks in his NFL career than Jalen Walker, right?
I'd understand it.
Yeah, and Josiah Stewart's another guy that's probably not going to go in the top 80, even though he's ranked here, just because the size profile, again, is an outlier, and he's not going to be a fit for every team. He's probably going to be a rotational guy. It's hard to draft someone you don't envision being a starting caliber player early, especially with how deep the edge class is. And I think every team is going to look at this class very differently, because when you're a draft analyst and you're looking at a prospect, you're kind of have a fake team that you're, it's like, okay, this guy fits, he could go here. But if you have a certain scheme, it just might not fit at all. Like, you just can't draft Josiah Stewart if you're a certain team, unless, you're really just like okay with him being only a pass rush specialist and not playing on early downs.
I don't want to spend too much time on Stewart, but I don't know if you caught this, but he worked out with Will Johnson the other day. I guess that was yesterday, and ran a 4.85, which at his size, that was like a little bit of a worry in a crowded edge class,
That's why nobody's running, because it's like,
right.
The perfect example of this actually is what's his name, the wide receiver from Miami.
Oh, Restrepo. Yeah,
Restrepo. It's like, dude, let him believe that you run 4.6.
Right.
You can't do it 4.8. Yeah. And so that's a rough one. And
quicker than fast, blah, blah, blah. Probably runs in the high 4.6s. That's what's on the report as opposed to 4.85. Right. Right.
And so for the team, I understand why they want everybody to run and want the full picture. For the player, if you're going to run slow, just don't run and let him, you're telling them you're going to be slow, but you don't want to put something really slow out there. And,
we've brought this up a lot though in the past, but they at least do have GPS numbers on these guys too. So there is some game speed to go off of that. Maybe we won't run 40s in 10 years. I don't know.
How about some sleepers that could potentially go higher than a lot of people expect? If you're just kind of a casual fan, or even if you follow the draft closely and you're like, you know what? Oh, wow. So-and-so went a lot higher than I expected. I think you can find some of those prospects here at the end of the top 100 from Dane Brugler. I would highlight a few in the 80s here and 90s. You got Charles Grant, who's 89 overall.
I'm a big fan with them.
Yeah. But again, he didn't have a chance to work. Actually, he did work out. That's another thing that I love the Beast for, because I didn't see any William and Mary workouts. And I know he was hurt and didn't work out at the combine because he got hurt in his final college game. But he ended up doing a pro day workout, and it wasn't bad, but it wasn't like, oh, wow, okay, first round athleticism
Right.
all day. I don't know if you saw his workout numbers, but he was 6'4".
I wonder how long he's had to train, and is he
Right.
just pushing it to do it before the draft? Is he really ready? That was a late injury.
Not bad, but he's not. He's really long arms, almost 35-inch arms. He looks bigger than this on tape. It's probably because of the guys he's going up against at William and Mary. But he was just under 6'5", 311 pounds at the combine, 309 at his pro day. Again, long arms, big hands. He ran a 509 40-yard dash, and not great short shuttle, 495, 7.883 cone, and 20 bench press reps. So
I would definitely expected better, but yeah.
A
guy 2 down from him on this board too, Kyle Williams from Washington State. I think he's going up.
Yeah,
maybe top 60. I think there's a chance that people are really high on him.
His tape is fun, dynamic athlete.
It is.
Actually, you just talked about him on Locked On 49ers, and Crocker compared him to Deontay Johnson as a prospect, and I thought that was pretty good. And Johnson ended up going high 3rd round. Is that right?
He was 66 overall. I only know that because it's my favorite number, and I was born on 6'6". But yeah, I actually made that same comparison weeks ago. Yeah, I think they're very similar. Williams might even be faster and more of a deep threat.
Yes, yeah, he's every level he can threaten you. Not a ton of play strength, but he's not tiny either as a wide receiver. And there's some oddball receivers in this class. Jalen Knowles, another name that can go high, even sneak in as like a 3rd wide receiver potentially in the entire draft. Jaden Higgins' teammate as well. Yeah, but down here right after Kyle Williams, so these guys are almost all back to back right here. Charles Grant, Kyle Williams, Ty Hamilton, all 4 of the starting defensive linemen for Ohio State in Dane Brugler's top 100. A couple more guys right after that are super interesting. And actually, number 100, I want to call out here, Braden Swinson, who, if you're just looking for a pass rusher, don't be shocked if Braden Swinson, just because of his size, he's 6'4", 255, a lot more projectability than someone like Josiah Stewart, and a lot better athlete too. For GMs want to dare to dream and want to have a lot of boxes checked. So he was productive. Not great against the run, but for those 3-4 teams, you're looking for a stand-up rusher. I could see Braden Swinson going a lot higher than Josiah Stewart and even potentially sneaking into the top 50 picks.
I was going to mention that too. If you're sitting there and 16 edges are off the board and you have to quote settle for Braden Swinson as edge 17, you're doing fine.
A player that everyone seems to love that is higher on, and again, I think that's kind of what and I think this is what I talked about this yesterday. The reason I think that guys like Shamar Stewart and Michael Williams are going to go higher than people expect, because they're a prototype for a defensive end as far as weight and height and being able to stop the run. You have to stop the run first before you get to anything else. There's so many stand-up rushers and undersized pass rushers and players like that in this class. I just have a hard time believing that those players are going to go ahead of some of the bigger defensive ends.
Yeah.
But Oluwafemi Oladejo out of
UCLA
is an interesting one, because he's a high character player, high motor player, former linebacker, but he actually has some size and got up to 260 pounds at 6'3", has decently long arms. A very strong player, but he doesn't know what he's doing as a pass rusher too.
So, no.
And he's ranked at number 64 overall. I think that's rich for him, but he does have some ability and he does have some physicality. I just don't see a pass rush plan, and he's someone that could be without a position in the NFL too. And again, another guy with no 40 time, so you're going to be an undersized rusher, and we don't really know how fast you are. And it makes the projection a little bit more difficult. I have a hard time believing Oladejo is going to go that high in this draft.
Yeah, and you know how we do that triple take series for the Steelers? It was the first wave of them was quite a while ago, and we always pick a sleeper. That was my sleeper edge. Linebacker turned edge, might be a nice value in the 5th round. Now everyone's talking about him like 2nd, 3rd. I'm like, oh, I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves on this guy. Yeah.
I liked him when we were talking about him as a 4th round prospect.
Right. Project, special.
He does fit that Steelers vibe, though.
He does, but right.
There you go. Brugler's top 100. You can find all of it in the Beast at The Athletic. Shout out to Brugler. Fine work being done there. Get your draft questions in for us for this week's mailbag. We are filming the mock draft special behind the scenes as well, which is always an awesome undertaking that has everybody in the network involved. So make sure you subscribe to Peacock and Williamson to find the mock draft special and to find our show every single day, YouTube and anywhere you get your podcast. Matt and I back tomorrow. Peacock and Williamson.